Hi guys, this is Frankie from the Pixel Slayers. Today we're going to go over some promotional manuals from 1994. This was the peak of the console wars in the 16-bit generation. Both of these manuals were pack-in manuals. What I mean by pack-in is they came with games and accessories you might have purchased for your SNES or Genesis console at the time, here in America at least. These are pretty cool little snapshots in time, and we're just going to go through them and explore what they have in the cool 90s language. Side by side, you'll see that the Sega one is significantly bigger, and that's mostly because the Sega one's promoting multiple platforms. This was early 94, maybe late 93, I believe, when right before the dreaded 32X came out. But even at that time, you can see that they're promoting the Genesis, the Game Gear, the Sega CD, and the new 6-button arcade pad for the Genesis, and a TV tuner for the Game Gear. So they're promoting hardware and games for 3 platforms versus Nintendo's strategy, which was all-in-one. And so they're all in on one platform, which was a Super, and so their poster's smaller, and it's just showing the 1994 lineup of their top-tier games, and a couple older ones. So anyways, I'm going to zoom in on these. We'll probably go over the Sega one first, because it's a lot more to cover. And one thing I just want to mention now is, look at this. Look at the Play It Loud 90s Extreme. Play it loud! Even have the crazy font, I just love it. And over here we have Sega, Welcome to the Next Level, also very colorful. The 90s were all about multiple colors, very extreme, very exciting. So let's look at the Genesis one close up first. Okay, so let's start at the top left hand corner where the Genesis is prevalent. Now this was also, I believe this was right before, this was like fall 93, spring 94, and this was before Sonic 3 came out. So if you look at the Genesis lineup of games, they're advertising Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It was a pack-in title for the Genesis Model 1, and it was a pack-in title for the Genesis Model 2, which, fun fact, that was actually my first Sega system I ever owned, which was a Model 2 Genesis that came with Sonic the Hedgehog 2. So yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, a game called Dinosaurs for Hire, which I know a lot of games, but I don't really quite remember that one that well. Cool Spot, which I absolutely love. It's made by the developer of Aladdin, which is an amazing game. Very overlooked game. We got to get a copy of it. We're going to do a video on that. Shining Force, which I just love. Shining Force is such a great RPG. And then, of course, moving up, you have NFL Football 94. Whoopee. Cyborg Justice, which, generic. X-Men video game, which it's alright. Like the sequel better. Jurassic Park, also alright. A lot of licensed games I noticed. Yeah, Instruments of Chaos, starring Indiana Jones. Roadrunner. Holyfield's Real Deal Boxing, which is actually surprisingly pretty good from what I hear. And Echo the Dolphin. Surprisingly, not a whole lot of strong titles here. It just kind of shows you where they were at the end of 93 into 94. The tides were starting to turn towards Nintendo's favor around this time. And it's kind of easy to see, some of the promotional, like, the games that they're advertising. It's kind of easy to see why. And this is also, I believe, like, first-party published stuff, too, so it wasn't showing some of their stronger third-party lineups. Okay, so next let's go to the Game Gear. I got the Game Gear late in its life, probably like 97, pretty much after Sega stopped supporting it. I was able to pick up the Game Gear real cheap, probably like $35, and they were originally like over $150, so I got a cheap Game Gear and I loved it, even though I was able to get some really cheap games at Toys R Us when they were clearancing them out. This was not that time in its life. This was probably the heyday of the Game Gear days. I wouldn't say it gave the Game Boy a run for its money sales-wise, but technically it was way more advanced, and it did have pretty good sales. 93, 94 were some of its best years, and here's some of the games that Sega's advertising. You got Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which is completely different than Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Genesis. It's the 8-bit version, which is, I don't like it as much, but it's still fun. I love all the 8-bit Sonic games that came out for the Master System and the Game Gear because they're all unique, and they're really well programmed. And you wouldn't think an 8-bit system could handle Sonic, but it sure could. Now we have Land of Illusion, which is basically their version of World of Illusion on the Genesis. Tailspin, The Little Mermaid, a lot of Disney franchises. Sega had a contract with Disney, so you're going to see a lot of Disney things. Got Tailspin, Ariel, which is the Little Mermaid game, which I just said. Home Alone, which is Tom and Jerry the movie. Vampire Master of Darkness, which I never played. It kind of looks like Castlevania a little bit. Streets of Rage 2, which actually got a pretty good 8-bit port. Quest for Shaken Yak, or Shaven Yak. It's Ren and Stimpy. Never played it, but it's pretty common. I need to play that. And then a 8-bit version of Holyfield, which, Next, let's look at the Sega CD. Sega CD was probably, I wouldn't say it was as weak as the 32X, but it definitely wasn't holding its own sales-wise, and even back then, I didn't really get the point of it. It had a few really good games, Final Fight being the definitive version, and 16-bit home port. Final Fight was great. Sonic CD obviously was a masterpiece. Echo the Dolphin had a good soundtrack. There's some good stuff in it, but there wasn't enough content to really sell it to me, and many other people either. So we have the NFL football, which is, they call Joe Montana's NFL football, was Sega's Sega Sports version of Madden, pretty much. They're advertising that. I think it had slightly better sprites and visuals on the Sega CD, but also had better audio, and that's what they're advertising. Echo the Dolphin, which, like I said, has a great soundtrack. Like, I think the Sega CD version is the version to get just for the soundtrack. Sometimes I can't fall asleep at night, I'll listen to that soundtrack. Instruments of Chaos, once again, you're seeing a lot of Genesis repeats. And then Night Trap, infamous Night Trap. And then once again, you got that Final Fight game I was telling you about. This is the best version of Final Fight you can get, basically, on a console that I know of. I mean, I'm sure there's a better version, but for the common folk, the common man. Batman Returns, which is a pretty good Genesis game. Never actually played the Sega CD version. It looks a little different. Afterburner 3, which it's alright. Rise of the Dragon, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Home Detective Volume 2, which sounds terrible. I don't even have to say anything, it just looks terrible. Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin. Let's just move over to the bottom of the manual now. You have them advertising the current hardware. Like I said, this is before the 32X came out. So this is pretty much right when the remodel of the Genesis came out, which this was my version. I actually bought this version with Sonic 2 when this came out. So this is right around the time I bought my Genesis. So you have the Genesis 2, and then you have the new 6-button arcade pad, which always made me mad. Like, even back when I was a little kid, I was mad, like, why didn't this come with that? They just remodeled this, give me the new controller, but of course you had to go buy it. And then the Game Gear, of course. I believe the Game Gear dropped in price this year. I don't think it got quite under $100, but it did get cheaper. And then the TV tuner, which I thought was so cool. Like, oh my gosh, I can pop this little cartridge in my Game Gear and I can watch TV. That's amazing. And of course, the Sega CD, the $300 mammoth right here that they were pushing at the time. And then here is the front of the manual again in the corner, lower right hand corner. You see Sonic Tales, some Sonic 2 artwork there, and Sega's famous "Welcome to the Next Level." And on the back, it's a giant Jurassic Park poster. Not much to see. I'm just going to this is the easiest way for me to show you it. The top of it, it's just literally a video game poster for the game. And this game came out on every platform that existed, but Sega was really pushing it because they were publishing their consoles versions. And a very old school looking Sega logo at the bottom, like surprisingly old school. It looks like something from the Master System days. And that's the back of it. They usually put a cool poster in the back of these things, and that's what's on the back of this one. Not that impressive, honestly. If I were to hang it up, I would hang up the other side just for the nostalgic 16-bit war vibe going on there. So next, let's look at the Super Nintendo one. So their poster was actually done on the back side They knew that people are going to want to be hanging these up, so you'll see a big giant Donkey Kong there, and also Metroid artwork on this, and very extreme. Play it loud. This was right before Donkey Kong Country came out, which had a huge advertising campaign. Something that I'm surprised it's not mentioned on here is this is also when the Super Game Boy came out, and I don't see any Super Game Boy on this. It's kind of curious. You think they would have Super Game Boy on here, because that was a huge deal when that came out. So let's go ahead and start zooming in on this and take a look. Okay, so like I said before, this is a lot smaller because this is all Super Nintendo. They're not even advertising the Game Boy here, not even the Super Game Boy. So this is a smaller poster. I love the Donkey Kong sprite, the artwork there. I guess it's not a sprite since it was 3D rendered, but I don't know. Not very technical with that. But you'll see a screenshot of Donkey Kong Country with advanced computer modeling. This was pretty big news. Silicon Graphics teamed up with Rare, and they really delivered something special back in '94. I remember seeing this game and being like, oh my god, that's so cool. And then below there you have Tetris 2. Yay. And then hockey. Gotta have a hockey for the Canadians in here. Got NHL Stanley Cup hockey. I don't know anything about hockey, but there it is. Major League Baseball. And then here's the big old play it loud, like they really wanted you to play it very loud. And right here you have, I'm going to butcher this because I never can pronounce these right, but you have Illusion of Gaia. I'm sorry if that's not proper pronunciation, but I have a screenshot for this, which was like a popular game at the time. Not as popular as Final Fantasy, but pretty popular. Super Punch-Out, which, pretty fun game. Like the first one better, but this is Superpower. And then Uniracers, which, yeah, obviously that took off. And then we have 10 Star, which, and then you have Stunt Race FX. And then, even though these were older titles at the time, Super Mario World's there, and I believe that was a pack-in game for a very long time. I know they had a cheap version that didn't come with it, but a lot of people just bought the version with it, so I figured, I guess they figure, hey, let's just show it off. Obviously, they didn't have Super Mario World 2 till a couple years later, and I remember in the 16-bit era, everybody was just like waiting for a new Mario, like, when's Mario World 2 coming out? When's Mario World 2 coming out? You gave us 3 last generation, how come we're still waiting for another one? And it was a point of frustration for a lot of fans, and then of course, we didn't really get a sequel till the 64 was just about out, and it wasn't quite a true sequel. It's a great game in its own right, but a lot of people were disappointed that it wasn't more Mario-esque. But of course, Mario 64 came out, and the rest was history. And right here, the other big giant point on this manual cover poster thingamajigger is Metroid, Super Metroid. Another big title. I believe this was already out at the time that this poster came out, but they were advertising it anyways with some cool artwork. And this was such a great game. Such a great game. I can't even... You know it's a good game. And of course, you got your Nintendo logo and the seal of quality, which, you know, classic Nintendo. And just to remind you, it's only for Nintendo. Now the back side, well, technically the front side, is pretty cool in its own right too. I like it a lot better than the Jurassic Park poster we got in the Genesis one. You have an awesome poster of Star Fox there. Really cool looking. I really like it. Even though this game was like a year old at the time, they were still pushing Star Fox. Understandably, it's a great game. I really like the realistic look to this poster. That's just, obviously it didn't look like that in the game, but it's a pretty cool look for it. You'll see that it's trying to get you to join Nintendo Power, and these pack-ins came like pretty much all the way up until the Wii. They were pushing Nintendo Power with like little pack-in manuals. They got smaller later on, but yeah, they were pushing these little, these will come in like every single accessory box or game box, just trying to get you subscribed. And there's a number. I wonder who's on that line these days. And there's some cool, extreme, ironic, old-looking dude that was very popular. I remember walking into Spencer's, and this was like a style, like, let's make fun of the 50s because we're so extreme in the 90s. Yeah. So yeah, that was pretty much the Nintendo one. Now, which one do I like better? I don't know. I grew up with a Genesis. I had to go to my friend's house to play the Super. I got the Super later. And just for my memory's sake, I'd probably have to say I like the Sega one better. But looking back on it, this was pretty cool too. And I'm sure probably artistically I think the Nintendo one's done better. But personally I like the Sega one better just because I grew up with it. So let us know in the comments what you thought. Which one you thought was better. Which one won the 16-bit wars for you. And if you like this video, click the like button. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe. You'll get all the updates when we release a new video, which is quite often. We're a new channel, and we're up and coming, and we're going to keep giving you videos. This is Frankie Torres. Bye.